I think it's safe to say that Jujutsu Kaisen is the biggest new ongoing anime right now. And it honestly does deserve all the praise and attention it's getting. The show is super entertaining, looks fantastic, and has lots of fun and interesting characters with room to grow. It has all the makings of becoming a modern-day flagship shonen series like My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer. And the sales of the manga in Japan definitely reflect that sort of status. I started looking back at all the anime that came out in 2020, which honestly felt like a pretty lackluster year for new anime series. But there was a piece of news that was hyped up and showed signs of promise at the start of the year. 2020 was the first year where we started seeing webtoons and Korean manhwa getting adapted, and the reactions turned out to be pretty mixed despite all of the hype, especially with God of High School. Even though it had some of the best looking fights of the year, I personally didn't think the show had anything else to offer outside of that, which seems to be the consensus many people have come to. It got to a point where people began to joke about how the show kept tanking the more it went on, but this whole situation seems really strange. You have two battle shonens, which ended up being adapted by the same studio, have great action scenes, and yet Jujutsu Kaisen just feels superior in every way. Why is that? It's as if MAPPA literally ripped the heart out of God of High School and just gave all their effort to Jujutsu Kaisen and Attack on Titan. I think when you look at these two series, it really goes to show that regardless of what genre a series is tackling, you still need to set a foundation and write an interesting story. Battle shonens are no different, and having good-looking fight scenes won't save a series from feeling hollow. So let's take a look and see how both of these shows handle some battle shonen elements and how they each hold up as a story. When it comes to great and popular battle shonens, the concept that pretty much all of them have a firm grasp of are power levels. Lots of shonens have some kind of ranking system in order to classify how strong certain characters are in the show, for both the good guys and the bad guys. Think of Bleach with the Espadas, or Demon Slayer with the Demon Slayer core rankings and Muzan's 12 Kizuki. In Jujutsu Kaisen's case, they classify their own sorcerers and curses by grades, and give us a description of the amount of firepower that would be needed in order to stop those curses. Giving us an idea of how strong a particular curse or sorcerer is will allow us to make certain judgments about the fights that take place. For example, when Itadori, Nobara, and Fushiguro realize that they're dealing with a special grade curse, a sense of dread takes hold because they know they're completely outmatched and there's nothing they can do about it. It's moments like these that make the show much more interesting and dramatic simply because we know how strong something is and what it means for our protagonists. The fact that this happens really early is also a good move because it serves as a life-threatening wake-up call for our main trio, that they must get stronger if they want to even survive, let alone view exercising curses as a casual day job, which Nobara was guilty of and Gojo immediately corrected. Nobara and Fushiguro really felt the severity of their weakness just as much as Itadori, if not more so, considering they believe that he died from that incident. Transitioning to God of High School, the show struggles to give a clear distinction of power from one another, and expects everyone to just go along with the ride. There are multiple characters who show up in the opening, appear very early on in the tournament, just to get beaten by one of our three protagonists and never be seen again. These characters were just thrown in to make the protagonists look strong, but we never knew how strong any of these people were to begin with. Even their techniques and abilities meant absolutely nothing, which brings me to the other major aspect of shonen series: power systems. Not all battle shonens have power systems, but having one usually leads to creative fights that are more clever and cerebral, rather than just brute force, strength, and level ups from flashbacks and friendship. The Nen system in Hunter x Hunter is what I believe to be the most well-balanced and thought-out power system, where just about anything is possible, and it never feels unfair or cheap. Everyone has good and bad matchups for their particular skill set. Jujutsu Kaisen uses cursed energy, which does resemble Nen in some ways. The way cursed energy is able to flow and be maneuvered around the body is the most similar characteristic, but it's definitely not a carbon copy. It's still pretty early on in the show, so we more than likely don't know the full capabilities of cursed energy and other cursed techniques like domain expansion, which almost feels like a whole other system in of itself. And cursed techniques are supposed to be what really makes the true strength of Jujutsu sorcerers. The show has already revealed how there can be bad matchups for people and how greater understanding and manipulation of cursed energy can make for a more powerful opposition. Mahito is a perfect example of this. Despite the fact that he's presented to be a relatively young and inexperienced cursed spirit, he's really smart and is able to deduce his opponent's abilities and strategies quickly. He's able to manipulate his soul and cursed energy in ways to nullify all physical attacks, and is constantly evolving and learning new tricks as he fights. If it wasn't for Sukuna intervening in the middle of his fight with Nanami and Itadori, he more than likely would have ended up overwhelming them and coming out on top. When we switch over to examine God of High School, there's not much clarity on there even being some sort of power system at all. At first, I thought some of the techniques that Jin, Mira, and Dei were using in their fights summed up that this show was going to focus more on making us understand the different levels of power that characters possessed. But they didn't. That's when God of High School became more concerning for me. And then they introduced Charyoks. Originally, I was pretty excited that the show was going to finally explain this power and how it worked. But I think you guys are starting to see a trend here. It ended up being really disappointing. All we're given to work with is that these supernatural powers are from gods, and some of them seem to be more well known than others. However, there aren't any details given as to what is capable with these powers or how you actually acquire them in the first place. It just seemed like everyone got their powers right about when they needed them in order to win a fight, except for Dei, who went to go look for someone to train him. And even though he's the only character who went to seek training to learn about his Charyok, we never saw him actually do anything with it. Instead, both him and Mira get trampled pretty late in the series, and Jin now has to go save the day somehow. At this point, I was so in the dark that I went to the God of High School wiki just to see if there were more to the system, and I was actually surprised to see that there was quite a bit. It sounds like a pretty dope system. Although Charyoks are powers borrowed from gods, the user can still shape them into something unique based on their own imagination. The general idea is pretty broad, but this could be pretty cool and result in some awesome creative fights. Yet apparently, none of this got into the anime, since all Mappa cared about was making sure as many fights got into the show as humanly possible. Moving aside from the major shonen heavy aspects, there are multiple differences between these two series that aren't exactly that big of a deal, but they add up to really widen the gap of quality. With shonen stories, regardless of what events take place, there's always some sort of foundation that keeps it on track. In Demon Slayer, Tanjiro's ultimate goal is to find a cure for Nezuko. In Jujutsu Kaisen, Itadori has to collect all of Sukuna's fingers so that Sukuna can be exorcised once and for all. In God of High School, Jin wants to prove he's the strongest by winning the tournament. And then a little over halfway, the tournament is cancelled and the very foundation on which the series was built is now destroyed. While this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's going to be even more challenging for the show to establish a direction that feels appropriate if it decides to continue with the season 2. If anything, it might be better for the show going forward, since I was already feeling doubt about the show's quality when it was starting with a tournament arc. I think the core issue that plagued God of High School and was more than likely the main cause of many of its problems was the pacing. And what's surprising is that Jujutsu Kaisen is not a slow-paced show by any means. They're both very fast-paced shows, but God of High School definitely takes it to another level. What's more important though is how both shows use the time they're given in each episode. Jujutsu Kaisen accomplishes a lot more than just delivering fight scenes one after the other. It works on making its characters more unique, fleshing out the power system, and adding layers onto the plot and characters that can be tackled later on. I think a great example of this is in episode 7, where Gojo is showing his complete dominance over Jogo, who is said to be equivalent to the power of 9 Sukuna fingers. Gojo then drags Itadori out to the fight to teach him about domain expansion. Obviously, Jogo with his short temper gets furious as Gojo's able to calmly lecture and tell us along with Itadori about the basics of domain expansion. This scene gave us an amazingly animated fight while being able to provide exposition about a powerful technique and be hilarious at the same time, simply because of how one-sided the fight is. In general, Jujutsu Kaisen has done a surprisingly good job of being able to balance action along with providing focus on some of its characters, in spite of its fast pacing. When it comes to Itadori, the show attempts to diverge on a different path that most shonens don't take when it comes to developing their main characters. Shonens are obviously known for always using certain tropes, like the power of friendship or flashbacks, to get their main characters through a fight. However, Jujutsu Kaisen is way less friendly and unforgiving to Itadori, as his weakness has been thrown back in his face on multiple occasions, and even cost him his own life. No one was there to save him from his own downward spiral. As a matter of fact, the only one who can feel his distress is Sukuna, who just takes pleasure in his plights and peril. There's no one there in his mind with the exception of his grandfather to encourage him to fight. Jujutsu Kaisen forces its characters to go through harsh realities and experiences in order for us to see if they can grow or if they will ultimately crack under the pressure. Junpei ended up being one of those who unfortunately could not find the strength within himself to carry on and accepted the sweet-sounding ideologies that Mahito fed him. In the end, the burden of his death fell upon Itadori, who now has to deal with the fact that he failed to save Junpei and cope with the act of killing another human. These moral dilemmas seem like they'll become more common in the show and will change how the characters carry themselves later. That's not to say that I think every character in Jujutsu Kaisen is masterfully written. As a matter of fact, I think that the characters are currently Jujutsu's weakest point, but it's still early on and there are promising signs for character growth. When we swap over to look at God of High School and their main trio and supporting cast, there are a few characters that I thought were at least somewhat noteworthy. Day was really the only character out of the trio who had some sort of concrete reason and story as to why he wanted to win the tournament in the first place. Jin is just there to fight everyone, and Mita's issues, her lack of confidence and burden of the Moonlight Sword, really have nothing to do with the tournament. Day was at least fighting for a friend that he truly cared for, and I actually did enjoy his mini character arc, even if I did think his rage towards his established friends was too over the top. If anything, I think my favorite character was probably Commissioner Q. The guy had some pretty cool powers, more personality than most of the other characters, and a funny gag about his pay being denied over and over again. Ilpio was also a decent character too. Look, I could easily just keep going on and providing more issues that exist within God of High School, such as the antagonists doing nothing productive except setting up another action scene, or Jin, Mita, and Day's friendship feeling rushed and lacking genuity, but we would be here all day. To be honest, I don't know if it's Mappa's fault or Crunchyroll's fault, but man, some people really did not want God of High School to be successful. And it really does kinda suck, because I do think there are some great webtoons and Korean manhwa out there, and the 3 adaptations we got this year weren't really handled with enough care. I would love to see Ufotable adapt Solo Leveling or watch a faithful adaptation of Bastard, but with Sony now acquiring Crunchyroll, who knows what's going to happen now. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, as it would really help me out. Subscribe if you want to see more. I'm planning to go through my picks and predictions for the Crunchyroll Anime Awards. Hopefully the awards don't end up being as lopsided as I think they're going to be. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.